International Criminal Court issues arrest warrants for Israel's Prime Minister and former Defence Minister. Members of the incoming Trump administration slam the move. Efforts to reach a ceasefire with Lebanon continue as US envoy Amos Hochstein meets with Netanyahu in Jerusalem. And dozens killed and injured in a strike on the Syrian city of Palmyra. Iranian and Hezbollah assets thought to be among those killed. First, a senior member of the incoming Trump administration has warned the International Criminal Court to expect a strong response come January. The incoming National Security Advisor Mike Waltz spoke after the court issued arrest warrants for Israel's Prime Minister and former Defence Minister. Waltz said the court was entirely without legitimacy. Well, Israel's President, Prime Minister and opposition leaders have all condemned the warrants for Benjamin Netanyahu and Yoav Gallant. But Hamas, Jordan and the European Union have all welcomed the move.
As I said before, the tragedy in Gaza has to stop. And now I will be very sober in my comment. It is not a political decision. It is a decision of a court of justice, of an international court of justice. And the decision of the court has to be respected and implemented. This decision is a binding decision, and all states parties of the court, which include all members of the European Union, are binding to implement this court decision.
And international reactions to that move by the ICC have been pouring in throughout the afternoon. The Netherlands was the first country to announce that it would enforce the arrest warrants for Prime Minister Netanyahu and ex-Defence Minister Yoav Gallant. There was a slightly more nuanced take from France and Italy. They both said they respected the ICC but declined to comment on whether or not they would arrest Israel's leaders. Hungary and Argentina have both criticised the move. Well, here with me in the studio was issuing those warrants. Israel's Prime Minister was in talks with US Special Envoy Amos Hochstein on a potential ceasefire with Lebanon. Meanwhile, the fighting continues, as our Joe Brown now reports.
Is this the beginning of the end? After spending an extra day in Beirut to hammer out the remaining details for a ceasefire between Israel and Hezbollah, US Special Envoy Amos Hochstein arrived in Israel on Thursday to meet Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and bring an end to the war that has been raging on Israel's northern border for over a year. Whilst in Beirut, Hochstein spoke to Lebanese Parliament Speaker Nabi Berri on behalf of Hezbollah, with both sides saying that progress was made and a deal now relies on the final green light from Netanyahu.
The comments that we made indicate that we agreed to this path of indirect negotiations through Berry if the other party wants this. I know that Israel wants this. We will see what the result is. Do we expect these negotiations to lead to a ceasefire and a cessation of aggression quickly? No one can guarantee, because the issue is linked to the Israeli response.
The latest on the fighting in the north, our Zach Anders joins us from the city of Haifa. So, Zach, I mean, generally when ceasefire talks are going on, there tends to be an uptick in violence. Is that what we're seeing at the moment?
Well, it's fairly consistent, the level of rocket fire that we've seen. The approximate number of rockets that are crossing over that border every day does fluctuate. But the results seem to be nearly the same. Today, an approximate 35 rockets fired from Lebanon into northern Israel. That's down from 100 the day before. But it killed a 27-year-old man here in Nahariya, right where I'm standing earlier this afternoon. The real difficult element about standing here, this has got a play set behind me for kids. It's a very nice neighborhood, but there's no shelters around, and so as the alarms went off in an area where you have seconds to respond, the man was not walking on this path. He was in his car on the road behind this camera, ran to where I'm standing, and up against these rocks here, sought refuge, tried to take cover, but
While the IDF continues to target Hezbollah's efforts to rearm via Syria, Syrian state media claiming that dozens were killed and injured in an Israeli airstrike on the city of Palmyra in the east of Syria today. Israel has not claimed responsibility for the attack. For more on that, we're joined by Omar Abu Layla. He's the executive director of Deir ez-Zor 24. Good to have you with us, Omar. And you have written about this strike. You say it dealt a decisive blow to the Assad regime. Can you explain that for us?
Yes, thank you, Laura, for having me again. This is the message number thousands from the Israelis to Bashar al-Assad that we warned you many times that you don't need to engage in this conflict to support these militia, including Hezbollah. We have to mention also who they were killed in the last airstrikes in Tadmur or Palmyra, and Nujaba militia members, Iraqi militia, were hiding in Syria, and they were killed in these strikes. So the message from the Israelis to Bashar al-Assad, it's clearly sent yesterday, and it's not the first one. We remember very well 3-4 months ago, the Israelis also launched huge airstrikes against Assad army in Aleppo, and they killed almost the same number, 35, 37, and including officers, high officers. But yesterday the same. We talk about colonel, we talk about high officers, and also a member of these militia. So the message from the Israelis to Bashar al-Assad, you cannot continue supporting these militia, including Hezbollah militia inside Syria. You cannot offer them anything from Syria to Lebanon. We are watching every movement inside Syria or abroad.
Well, it's clearly very risky for Assad, isn't it? So why does he continue to support Hezbollah?
It's a political game from his side that in all this mess or this conflict in between these militia and against Israel, he has his own goals. That if I stop supporting these militia, they absolutely will turn against me. And also, we cannot forget, just days ago, Ali Larijani was in Damascus and in other Arabic capitals. So he brought a message from Ali Khamenei to Bashar al-Assad that you cannot stay away from these militia. We need you to support these militia in this period exactly, especially after the assassination of the top leaders of Hezbollah in the past weeks and months. And now you are the huge supporter of these militia. This message from Ali Khamenei to Bashar al-Assad by Larijani was clearly like response from the Israelis against Bashar al-Assad in the strikes yesterday.
So the US Senate overwhelmingly rejected a bill calling to halt the sale of certain offensive weapons to Israel last night. The bill, brought by left-wing Senator Bernie Sanders, was defeated by 79 to 18 votes. Not a single Republican lawmaker voted in favour. Lynn Plachmeyer has the story.
The Senate has rejected a bill to block U.S. arms sales to Israel. Senator Bernie Sanders had introduced 3 resolutions seeking to halt the Biden administration's recent sale of $20 billion in U.S. weapons to Israel, out of concern for the humanitarian situation in Gaza. All 3 resolutions failed.
Thank you.
Now, from arresting weapons smugglers to coordinating the delivery of humanitarian aid to Gaza, Israel and Jordan have been cooperating on many levels. But with anti-Israel sentiment growing in Jordan, the country's king, Abdullah II, is walking a tightrope between expressing criticism and maintaining important relations. Our senior correspondent, Bianca Zerini, has this report.
8 military helicopters loaded with more than 7 tons of humanitarian aid for Gaza. The Jordanian army flew emergency relief and medical supplies to the Strip, where they were delivered to the UN World Food Programme to be distributed later. Jordan's King Abdullah II highlighting his support for the Palestinian people in a speech earlier this week.
Jordan stands firmly in the face of the aggression on Gaza and the Israeli attacks in the West Bank, and we are working hard through Arab and international movements to stop this war.